So welcome again. Thank you very much for being here. We're looking at how you're going to be able to save 10 hours or even more. And yet the key thing is that you still have a high performing, even higher performing team than you have right now. So firstly, a little bit about me. I've got a range of things that I enjoy outside of work. I'm a Collingwood supporter, member in the AFL. So it's a photo of me with my partner and my son at last year's winning grand final. I like to keep fit, and I've been in a few fun runs. As you can see me struggling along in one of the runs there at the Melbourne Half Marathon. And then the big photo in the middle is one of the many leadership programs that I have run. I'm over on the left-hand side, and it's one of the 5-day live-in leadership program, just as an example of some of the leadership programs that I've been involved with. And today my passion is really about improving leadership and then helping others to create a better situation and a more positive environment for people to be in, whether it be in a work environment or a community environment. Because I've found that when you have engaging positive leaders in any group, then that group is much happier and satisfied and more balanced compared to the opposite. Okay. A little bit more about me in terms of my background. I first became a manager in my late 20s. I was one of the highest performers and the person that had been in the role the longest, so I got promoted to be the manager. And I thought I was doing really well as I was going along, working hard, working long hours, using a trial and error approach, as many people do. And eventually I got some leadership training and some specific coaching, and I found that I improved more in 1 year than I had in the previous 7 years. And then what I found, as I got better, other people started to notice, and they started to ask me to help them and guide them and coach them. I eventually had nearly 20 years in corporate in a couple of different industries, and then I stepped out and started doing the work that I am now, being a full-time leadership coach, leadership facilitator. And I've run leadership training for over 1,500 people and individually coached over 300 managers. And all of those managers have been able to work less hours and have a better balanced life, and yet still get promoted, earn more, hit more targets, improve the motivation and engagement of their team, which overall leads to a greater level of job satisfaction and health. So let's have a look at the kind of current environment that managers are existing in and see if you can relate to some of these things that are happening. Maybe it's been happening, maybe it's still happening for you at the moment. So what we're seeing, the research shows us quite clearly, is that there's low engagement out there in the workplace, and managers are even less engaged. So we're talking about 75 to 80% of managers are in the low engagement area when we get the surveys back. So, and that's a concern because it's hard for a manager who's not fully engaged and fully motivated to create a high-performing team. So burnout is one of the key things that managers are saying is a challenge for them with the amount of work and overload and overwhelm that they're facing. And so over 70% of managers say that they have consistently got a high workload, which leads to the feeling of overwhelm. And over 80% of managers say that they don't really feel like they've been set up for success by their organisation. And it's kind of like left up to them themselves to figure out how they're going to be a success in the role, just like I was in my roles in the early part of my leadership and management career. So my research in terms of looking at asking managers, how are you going? How are you performing? And I asked them about if you consider 10 out of 10 as being your best, not perfect, just at your best, where you can be really, really good with who you are as a leader. And I asked them to rate themselves. And most people rate themselves between 3 and 6. Okay? They've got some good things happening, some less than others, but they see that there's a lot of improvement that could happen there. They're just not quite sure how to get there. They want to be an 8 or a 9 or even a 10, yet they're just not really sure the key way that they can transition from being 3, 4, 5, 6 into being 8, 9, or 10. Now, what this looks like is that for those people who are in that 3, 4, or 5, what they're experiencing is low confidence, not sure exactly about how to go about what they're doing in their management role, a high workload. They find themselves doing the most difficult and complex tasks, and therefore they don't get a chance to be strategic. They'd like to develop others. They don't get the time to do that. And they're feeling like it could lead to burnout. So they're worried about that. They're worried about where their career's going. And sometimes that means they choose to leave. So as I'm going through this, ask yourself if any of these things connecting with you. And please feel free to jump in and share a comment in the chat or ask a question. Now, there's some that are a little bit higher in that up to around 5, 6 category. What they find is that they've got a bit of a confidence roller coaster. Sometimes they might feel like they're going well, and then other times the roller coaster goes back down and they're feeling a bit unsure of themselves. Okay. Often these people have been trying to do some sort of management and leadership development, do some courses, do some ways they can get some training. They try to implement some things, but fall back into old habits very quickly. Okay. They know they need to have some strategic time to get out of the weeds and the detail, but it's not very effective. So it still leads to them feeling like they're stressed and overwhelmed. Okay. What we ideally like is for all of you, for as many people as possible, to be at that 8, 9, or 10 and at your personal best, having very high confidence, being able to engage and empower others, yet still hold them accountable, and be able to think strategically and add value to the organisation and be operating in a proactive way rather than a reactive way. Okay. So one of the key things that all people in these situations talk about is the workload, the time that they're working, and they'd love to get some more time. So what this is about today is about looking at how can you save, as managers, save up to 10 hours, even more than 10 hours a week. And these are some of the things that I've put in place with hundreds of leaders over the years. Firstly, we're going to look at some things which I would call areas you can get some quick wins, and then there's some more work that's required as we get through the latter points here. So the first one we're going to look at is meetings. All right, we'll come back to that in just a moment. Then we're going to look at email and what's usually happening with people in their email and how that's affecting them. Then we're going to look at planning and capacity and recognizing that to-do lists don't work for most people. And then we'll also look at leadership skills and what you need to be effective as a leader and how much time that can save you. All right, so let's jump in straight away and have a look at meetings. And please feel free again to jump in and say anything that's come to mind for you, or any questions that are jumping into the mind. So firstly, most people have some meetings that when you stop and think about it, you could stop going to. Okay, so all managers that I've worked with have got at least one they can come up with straight away. Yes, I could stop going to that meeting. And then as we talk through it further, there's actually quite a few other meetings that they could stop going to. Now, does it take some assertiveness? Absolutely. Is there a concern in there, the FOMO, the fear of missing out if you don't go to some meetings? Yes. So it takes some work in terms of assertiveness and how you approach looking at these meetings. But as I said, everyone that I've worked with has had at least one meeting that they could say, yes, I can decline going to that meeting, and really nothing much is going to change. Okay. So that's the first thing, first quick win you can look at. Decline a meeting that will usually save most people 1 to 2 hours. So that's we're starting off in a week, at least 1 to 2 hours with declining a meeting. The next thing to look at is influencing, even if you're not a key person or chairing the meeting, okay, how the meeting runs, right? Getting the meeting to start and end on time, okay? And considering also how long meetings need to run for. and asking the question and maybe challenging. Most people put in the default 1 hour, or sometimes it's half an hour, sometimes it can be 2 hours. Changing the time of the meeting to suit how long the meeting really needs to go for, so it might be 25 minutes, it might be 45 minutes, changes up how we look at the meetings and can make them more effective. Okay. So with this, have a think about for you. You can, give me some feedback here. How often do you attend meetings that don't start on time, where we just seem to be having a bit of chat around at the start, waiting for some people who may be running a bit late, or someone who might be on their phone and is not quite ready to start? Anyone here experience those sort of things in meetings? Yes? No? Everyone here run? Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So that's with the people that I've been working with, they say the majority of their meetings, some are good, but the majority of them aren't run all of that well. Okay, so this is another thing to consider. You can save some times by sharpening up those meetings, and that can save you at least another hour a week. Okay, so what does it need to take for the meetings to be more effective? And one of the other things that you can do is insist on having a meeting purpose, agenda, roles, and that there's action items that come out of the meeting. One of the ways, for example, that you can choose as to which meetings you should go to is by asking the people running the meeting, what's the purpose, what's the agenda, and what role do you want me to play in this meeting? Okay. If they can't give you that information, then I'm strongly suggesting that you don't go to these meetings. Now, I know if it's your boss, you can't necessarily do that, and there's some structures there that you've got to consider in terms of who calls them. It's, in general, challenging people to have this information in a polite and appropriate way, but also in an assertive way, can help you, give you a guidance as to whether the meetings are going to be effective or not. Okay. And this can also help with people. So here Shirley has put in about meetings running back to back. So she's looked at the 25-minute meetings, which has helped her, I'm gathering from the comment she's made there. So thank you for sharing that, Shirley. All right. What I found in working with my clients is that there's a lot of people running meetings that haven't considered the purpose, the agenda, and the roles. And this does either one of two things. It gives you an opportunity to step out of the meeting at least some of the time. Or the other thing that happens is that they do get clearer on the agenda and the roles, and you get a better and more effective meeting happening. It tends to mean that it starts on time, finishes on time or early, and you will get back some time and save maybe another half an hour to an hour a week. Now, the other thing to think about here is bringing this into developing others and considering, could other people go to some of these meetings for you as part of their development and as part of you considering your overall workload? So that's another important element to consider. Yes, it takes some thinking. It takes some setting up, maybe some coaching. And what it can do, though, if you have one of those meetings coming up a week where you can get somebody else to attend as part of their development, then there's another hour perhaps that you've saved in this. So there's some ways of starting off that you can get some quick wins, and also some medium to long-term ways that you can be more effective with meetings. Please let me know if you've got any questions, and we'll also have question and answer time at the end. All right, the next one we're going to look at is email. So what I'm finding these days is people get a huge amount of email, and what's starting to happen by default is that we go to our email to see what emails have come in, to see if anything important's come in. And then what happens without really realizing it is that we are deciding what we should do based on looking at our email. Okay, and that is not the most effective way to operate. So what we want to be able to do is stop having the email be the system that you use to decide what to do, to be where it becomes a default to-do list, or it becomes a default way of prioritizing by looking at what are the latest emails that have come in. We want to consider email is a tool to help you. It's not the way that it should be deciding or determining your to-do list or your prioritization. And what that means is I want you to consider email in a different way. So instead of consistently looking at the emails and checking in what's come next, and this includes messaging as well, it's to look at email in terms of processing it in blocks. And processing emails in a way that is like what I call it, it's like considering what people usually do with physical mail, okay, which is back in the old days when we mostly got physical mail, not so much email, or even now when you get physical mail, not that it comes that often. What we do is we open them, have a quick look. What is this? Is there something we've got to do something with? Is it something that's important? Is it not important? Is it junk mail? And then we process our pile of physical mail. Now, I want you to consider doing this from an email perspective. Okay, so you have a block of time where you check through all the emails that have come in. You decide whether you delete them. You decide whether they go to a folder or a project where you need to do some work on them, or you decide whether you can make a quick response right then and there in the processing. And then you leave email aside and you do the high priority tasks. We'll come around to looking at that when we look at the planning. And you have a block of time where you do not look at email, where you're doing a highly focused task. Okay, and that will improve your effectiveness and save you, it could be anywhere from half an hour to a couple of hours a week in your effectiveness of completing those important tasks rather than having email interrupting you all the time. Now, another way to look at helping you here with the amount of emails that have come in is creating rules. Some of you may already be doing this. I know there's a lot of tips, things out there, but the one that's the most powerful, that's helped many people that I've worked with, and still with new clients that I'm talking to, I find most of them aren't doing this, and that is create a rule where everything that's CC'd to you goes into a separate folder. So it bypasses your inbox and goes into a separate folder, okay? And let all of the people know that are in your team, that are the key stakeholders, that are key people you're working with, that CC'd emails will go into a folder that you will read at some time later when you've got free time. So if they want to get your attention, they need to send the email directly to you, or you have another way, whether it be calling on the phone or another specific way that they can get your attention that says this is high priority, okay? What that does is it gets rid of a lot of email trails that a whole lot of people are CC'd in on, and gets it out of your inbox and into a separate folder, and it reduces the pressure. It relieves the sense of how many things you have to keep up with for most people. Okay, and it feels like you're able to get more in control of your email because there's less coming into the inbox. And what my clients also tell me is that when this is cleared up this way, it's much easier to identify the things that are high priority and most important, so they don't miss those things, which they sometimes can miss amongst the other hundreds of emails that are coming in. So there's some quick wins in terms of looking at email. Again, that can save you 1 to 2 to 3 hours a week by putting some of these things in place. All right, feel free to jump in if there's any questions, but I'll keep going. So the next thing to look at is planning. So one of the things that I notice has a huge impact on how people are seeing things is their planning and how they look at their capacity. In essence, what happens for most people is that they overestimate their capacity, or they just try and squeeze everything possible into a day or a week. Okay? And this is one of the reasons why to-do lists don't work very well. What the research has shown us around to-do lists is, for most people, what happens when you start a to-do list is that it gets long very quickly. And when it starts to get to be a long to-do list, okay, then it creates more pressure than if you don't have the to-do list. So the interesting thing that we found in terms of effectiveness is that if you don't have anything where you write stuff down, you try and keep it all in your head, your productivity, your effectiveness is lower. If you start a to-do list, it improves initially, right? And if you're not keeping that to-do list very short, and by that I mean 5 or less items, then you feel the stress and pressure of the long to-do list, okay? And the to-do list is not clearly prioritized. So that also impacts how effective you are. So what we want to be doing instead is thinking about keeping in mind what are our highest level strategic objectives, so they're always on our mind, connecting to what we're thinking about doing, what we're planning, how do they connect to our most important strategic targets, our KPIs, okay? And then we want to think about planning on a weekly basis. So we don't want to have long to-do lists that create more stress, okay? We don't want to plan daily, okay? Because most of what we've got on at the moment, anyone who's in a management position in all of our organizations, okay, a day is not a large enough unit. There's so much going on that we need to think about it in terms of a weekly unit and give ourselves a bit more time and flexibility. Otherwise, we think we've got to get too much done in an individual day. So we want to plan weekly. It's much more effective with thinking about our high-level KPIs and strategic objectives. Now, with this, I also want you to consider putting in the key things that you do outside of work. This helps you create the right boundaries and balance, okay? So if you want to do certain types of exercise, if you want to go to yoga classes or go to the gym, if you want to take your kids to school, if you want to go over and make sure one night a week you have dinner with someone in the family, then put some of those key things in as well. That helps to create the boundaries in your life. And when you're thinking about doing your weekly planning, what you also want to think about is what number of hours roughly do I want to work and that I think is appropriate and reasonable and fair to work given my role. Okay. Because one thing that I see that is clear is that almost all organizations will just encourage you to work more and work longer and get things done. So if you're going to have any sense of balance in your life, you need to be the one who is going to set the boundaries. So consider what that looks like on a weekly basis, and then you can start to look at your capacity. What can I fit in within those amount of hours worked, whether it's 30 or 40 or 50 or 60? That's up to you to decide. All right. Then you can consider what is going to be, you are going to be able to fit in that week. And planning in this way from a weekly point of view means that you need to start to think about, for each of the projects or tasks that you're doing, how do they connect to your key KPIs and how long will they take? Right? So it's not just a to-do list where you write a note down, you've got no idea how long it's going to take or when you're going to put it in. Now it's a specific task or project. You've got a block of time, you know exactly what you should be working on, and you've got to start to think about how long that particular block of a task will take and allocate that. Okay. Now, what this starts to get you to think about is you cannot fit everything in. So one of the key things that makes a huge difference here is prioritizing so that you choose what to do, but even more importantly, choosing what not to do. Okay? You get repeating that. So you clearly get to recognize you can't fit everything in, so you more consciously choose what not to do, as well as what's the priority of what to do, rather than just trying to figure out or just work harder to fit everything in. Okay. And so that's the core elements of the weekly planning process. Determine your own capacity and set your boundaries. Know your high-level objectives and KPIs. Plan the week out with consideration for your balance and what you want to do outside of work. And work out what will fit in. Okay. Now, another thing to add to this, if you have a role where unexpected stuff comes up, right, which most managers do, then you need to consider there's going to be chunks of time during the week where this will come up. You don't know what it is, but you're going to have to fix something, to put out fires, to work on something that your boss has decided and is now a priority. So you also, in your weekly planning, you need to consider some time, some space where you're going to be able to fit in those unexpected things that come up. All right? You don't know when it's going to be. You just know that it's going to take up a certain amount of time. So have a think about how much time in a week do you usually spend on unexpected things. If it's 20%, that's a day. So how do you find time every week for a day's worth of unexpected work? So that's going to be considered in your capacity as well. So with all of these things, you can see why it's very easy for most of us to get overloaded and feel like there's overwhelm and burnout, because we're trying to fit too much into a day, into our to-do list, and we just keep pedaling as hard as we can, hoping we're going to get in front. But it doesn't work that way. We're never going to get in front until we set the boundaries and choose what to do and what not to do. Okay. And putting this in place, again, will save you 1, 2, 3, 4 hours a week. Now, just a little tip. I encourage you to do this on a Friday. It's worked for all of my clients. It works much better to do this on a Friday for the following week. Okay. Everyone who's tried to do it on a Monday has not been anywhere near as effective in planning out their week. And the other added benefit that people have described, which I didn't think about when we started doing it, many people have described it, is when they've planned out their week on a Friday, they're much more relaxed over the weekend. And many talk about sleeping better and being more present for family and friends over the weekend. All right. Now, let's have a look at what's happening again for leaders and managers and how they're going about things, which might mean that they're not that effective with their management and leadership approach, and what you can do to change that to save more hours. So do you or the managers in your organization often think it's easier to do it myself, or if I do it, I know it'll be done right? Okay, this comes up a lot and leads to more work, and leads essentially is the way that you're self-sabotaging. Now, here's other things that many managers do. Ask yourself, are you doing some of these things? And it would be great if you could give me a thumbs up or put it into the chat if you've experienced some of these things or you're doing some of these things. So many managers jump in and protect the team from any failure of any task, any situation, jump in and make sure they fix things or improve the work. Usually managers, when they get questions from their team members, they give them very clear and specific answers to all the questions, telling them exactly what they need to do, right, to those questions, or just to set up and complete the task. Now, I'm going to say stop doing these things. They seem like the right things to do, but actually these are the things that lead to more work for you as a manager, and what you're doing without meaning to, is gradually teaching your team members that they need to do less and you end up with more. Okay? They need to do, they get to see, consciously or subconsciously, that if they come to you or they put it out there that something needs fixing, you'll be the one who'll jump in and do it. Whereas what we really want is for you to develop leadership effectiveness, so you're getting things done through others and others are performing at their very best, rather than coming to you as the one who's got all the answers or the one who's going to fix the problems. Okay? So one of the key ways to do this, firstly, is focus on building trust. Most team members, most employees say their managers focus on task, focus on getting things done, push, get things done. And then most managers say their bosses are doing the same to them, so that pressure comes down from the top. Get it done. You have to get it done. So we push that through. We do it ourselves, or we push it on to our team members. What I'm suggesting to you is, right, be able to stop, reflect, and make sure you spend some time building trust and recognizing what builds trust and what breaks trust. Okay. And then we want to be able to look at empowering your team members and really think about what that means. Okay. One example that I mentioned earlier for trust and empowering would be to coach and support one of your team members to go to a meeting that you usually attend, right? Get rid of one of the meetings for you to attend, get one of your team members to go along, help them to grow and empower and show that you trust them. Okay, so it really becomes about you stop doing things for them, fixing their work, fixing the situations if it's not quite as good as you think it should be, telling the step-by-step what to do, and having two-way discussions, being the leader who's a coach who guides and develops so people are improving their performance. Okay, pushing accountability back to them while you're still supporting them. Okay, and there's a lot of fine-tuning to understand exactly how that works. When you get this right, your team members will step up and increase their performance. They will become more proactive, and you will have more time, and yet you're getting a higher performing team. So that's what we're looking for from leadership effectiveness point of view. And what you want to be able to do is really be thinking about creating a succession plan. One of the things that stops managers from getting a promotion, one of the main things, is that inside their organization, there's not somebody coming through who can easily replace them. So you don't get promoted because if we give you the promotion, there's too big a hole behind you in your old role. So if you want to get promoted, it's about developing your people so they can do the things that you do, and the organization can see how that works coming through, and you'll be seen as an effective leader, someone who should be promoted. Now, the other key thing that's going to save you a lot of time is using proven leadership tools. Okay, so most people, like I did, they get into management and leadership and you try and figure it out trial and error. And each situation that comes up where you've got to give feedback, you've got to have a difficult conversation, you've got to hold people accountable, you've got to set up responsibility and understanding of roles. Where roles cross over, you've got to deal with different personality differences and challenges and a bit of conflict. We deal with it ad hoc as it comes up. So if you want to save time and be much more effective, then it's about knowing tools, having the tools that are going to work in these situations, getting to know those tools and making sure you use them and do that effectively. Okay. Now, it's going to take you a little bit of practice and a little bit of time to develop the skills to use these tools effectively. They will work. And then that will save you hours and hours by being able to repeatedly use the tools that you now know work, and you've developed the skills to use them effectively. So think about for you what those need to be. So they're the key things that are going to save you at least 10 hours a week if you put all of those in place. Some are quick wins that you can do quite quickly. Some will take more time and effort, but they really set you up to be a highly effective leader that have so many possibilities and career options and choices. Okay. So you can try doing all of this yourself. You can put this in place. There's plenty of these things that you can do yourself, although what I find is that most people get stuck, all right? So just consider what it might mean to you if you don't change in terms of burnout or your promotion, your growth, or if you're still in a similar position in 3 years' time. Okay. Or what it might look like if you got some help and guidance like I did all those years ago, and you can fast track your leadership development to have high confidence and create that highly performing, highly engaged team where you have multiple different career options. So which one do you want to be? And I'll talk about the coaching program, which one of you can win the program and the 12 months of coaching just for being here today. So the Engaging Leader program, which I've created to help leaders to become more effective, and priced and pitched this in a way that it's much more affordable than 12 months worth of one-on-one coaching. It's a program where I implement the systems with you and work with you until you have made that transformation into being that high-performing leader. And it includes online video-based training for all the key modules to become an effective leader. And you do worksheets, and I give you feedback on that. You get some one-on-one coaching, and you also get weekly live small group coaching for a year. So have a think about whether that's something that could be useful for you. And if it is, you get a 30-day test drive, right? So you get to try it out, and then you can decide whether it's for you. And if it's not, that's it. You don't worry about it. Don't need to worry about paying. We part as friends, really appreciate that you gave it a try. It's done with you implementation. So it's not where I give you the content and say, good luck, hope you can work out how to figure out how to implement it. You get support and guidance along the way with the coaching to show how to implement it and how to build those skills. It takes a couple of hours a week, and you can be at your best in as little as a few months. So you get a complimentary coaching session as a way to get an introduction to this to see if it'd be something that you're interested in. And here's just a couple of people. I'll let you read through about this, but a couple of people who have made some significant increases through going through this sort of a program. Some really smart, capable, intelligent people still found significant benefit in the subtleties of the different ways of being a leader that can make a big difference. And some of them connect back to what I've been talking to you about today. And now, over to you. I've given you a lot of information. I've gone through it pretty quickly. So what questions do you have? How can I help? And this is how you can contact me with more questions, or how you, if you want to, you can book in a time to have a chat. So was that useful? Had you heard those things before?
I think, Michael, it's quite useful. A few of them, like on and off following. But yeah, I think, as you mentioned, we need to get trained on them to properly address those issues in our workplace.
Yes. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad you found them beneficial ideas, something for you to think about, and recognizing that some of those require some training and development. So thank you for sharing, Vikram.
Yeah, Michael, like the tips are pretty useful. So we have to practice in our day-to-day work and see how efficiently we can save some time.
Yes, that's it. Give them a go, put them in place, see how you can start to save some time. Most people can put some of those things and save a little bit of time. But as Vikram said, then some people, many people really need a little bit of assistance to put in everything that we just talked about there. And if you do get to put all of those in, you can have a very well-balanced life and still an extremely successful career. So thank you for your comments.
Michael, I'm actually interested to know if you've had much to do with people where I'm finding emails sort of becoming the lesser tool of communication nowadays, and it is more around tools like Slack and Teams chat. And I'm talking not only within our company, but with our client base as well. And there's much more pressure to, that we're sitting waiting for the messages to fall. There's more expectation of an immediacy of a reply. And I'm not sure if you've got any hints and tips for how you protect yourself, because it can become a distraction. You see that something's popping up and someone's asking you a question, or whereas an email, you might say, hey, I'll check email at the beginning, I'll check it at the end of the day. Whereas with this sort of technology, it's slightly different.
It is slightly different, and it's thanks for asking that, Shirley. Yes, I have had many people now. It's come on more and more since COVID, and now flexible hybrid working, and it's something that we need to look at in a similar way. So the key thing there that I've found helps is having a discussion with your groups in terms of you using Slack and Teams and these messaging components. What type of communication is going to happen via the messaging? Okay, and making it clear that it's not expected that people are going to be sitting looking at their messaging app just ready to respond all the time. And that's the way to set the boundaries around that, so that, again, you can put on do not disturb or turn off the notifications from the app at certain times for you then to focus on tasks, elements where you need to really concentrate and focus without interruption. Okay. Yeah. So is that helpful? Does that make sense?
Well, it's certainly something I need to do, because, as I said, we have quite a flat structure, and we put in etiquette that, if you really want someone's attention, what you need to do. But I just do find that less and less of my client communication and team communication is coming via email. Like, it's a huge swing. I think since there's more and more people working remotely.
Yep.
So half of Slack is used for the quick one-liners you'd do if you were sitting next to someone at a desk. But you can sometimes lose the important stuff because of the noise, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And that's where it's about figuring out up front, which sounds like you've tried to do, but people aren't adhering to those rules. Is that right, Shirley?
I think it's more, it's horses for courses. I mean, I said I'm the CEO of the organisation, so I've probably got different responsibilities to say, like our consultants that are out in the field. So sometimes there's an element of urgency required if they're wanting, feedback from colleagues. But I was just wondering in general if you're finding that that's a trend you're seeing amongst the people you're working with, that this type of technology is overtaking email. That was probably more my question. Because I'm being an IT, you sometimes don't know, is that representative of the wider community or just for a bunch of
Yes, I am hearing that. So it's not everybody, but I am hearing more and more people are talking about that the messaging apps are taking over. And I'm hearing that in some ways that's even slightly worse because it's even a little bit easier. It's a little bit more informal, casual to just quickly type out a message. So they're getting even more of those in some ways than emails.
Yeah.
And it's also, they're telling me that now it's become harder because then they've got to manage the email like I spoke about, and then you've got to manage the messaging like you've just been speaking about. So that's adding to the stress and workload.
Yeah.
So
I think where sometimes a conversation could be quicker than a whole heap of asynchronous messages ping-ponging around the organisation as well. So that's the other side of it. Like, I think it's like I said, it's like our children don't use phones to talk to each other. It's all asynchronous and messaging and things like that, and that's creeping into workplaces more and more. You think, why didn't you just pick up the phone and speak to them or ping them on the message tool and speak to them? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just some observations I've made. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You are spot on. And the leaders that I work with that are as being really effective have picked up on what you're saying, and they're guiding the communication with people so that when something is really important or urgent, they do pick up the phone.
Yeah.
So that's how they're trying to change the way that's working, so that people know if you're going to send it by the messaging app or by email, there's a chance it's going to get missed. If it's really important, pick up the phone and call me, and it won't get missed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just about setting up how that works.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Great questions, and thank you for sharing. Anything else that you'd like to share or ask about before we finish up?
One last thing, Michael. So especially with the catch-ups or one-on-ones, which actually takes a lot of time if the team is bigger.
Yes.
So how do you reduce the time to spend on them or make it more efficient?
Yes. So first part of it is that we must see that as a high priority. Okay. So that needs to happen. And then the second part of it is looking at making sure that the one-on-ones at an appropriately regular interval. So it probably doesn't need to be weekly, and you need to, whether it's fortnightly or monthly, you can work that out with the individuals. And then the other part of it, what's really most important with the one-on-ones that can help to keep the time appropriately effective is that it's a personal check-in, right, on how they're going, how they're feeling, what do they need, what support or guidance, rather than it always feeling like it's a work in progress report. Tell me all the things that you're doing, tell me the things that are going wrong, and find another way to do some of that work in progress information updates. And that can help to reduce that. But the other element should be the more people that you've got in your team, the more that you should be empowering and delegating so that the majority of the work you do should be as the leader of the group, coordinating and communicating and checking in, not being the person who's actually got a whole lot of tasks to do. Now, I know that can be challenging in the way certain organisations are set up and the apparent expectations. But that's another way to look at it.
Cool. Yep.
Okay. And almost all managers that I've worked with, when they give their team members an opportunity to step up and put in a way that's about an exciting opportunity for them, they take it. So that's an example of enabling people and empowering them, and then that can again take away a little bit of those day-to-day tasks that a manager might need to do, and the manager focuses on the strategic, the leadership, the relationship, the coordination, cooperation elements of the team.
Yep.
Something for you to think about. Okay. Last chance. Anyone else like to ask a question? Fantastic. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Really appreciate you being here today to be part of the leadership webinar. Hope I've given you some tips that you can put in place comfortably to save yourself at least a few hours, and that you really take on board and consider some of the other elements that could save you 10 hours or more. Please feel free to reach out by email or book in a time to have a chat, and I'm happy to talk through one-on-one with you on how I could help you with anything we've covered today or any other leadership challenges that you've got. Nice to see you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you again.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Michael.
Take care.
Perfect.
Bye.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.